Hello and welcome to another session with the Bury St Edmunds Buddhists, exploring aspects of the Dharma, the Buddhist teaching and meditation. I hope you're all well. I hope you're all managing well to keep your connections with those friends, family that are important to you, and that you're also able to keep connection to your sources of inspiration. For the last 5 weeks, we've been following in our series that we've entitled How to Live Your Life. We've been exploring, the Buddha's suggestions of the qualities, 5 main qualities, that it would be beneficial both for ourselves and for the world to develop and to express. So that started with the first in the series of loving kindness. Then we looked at generosity. Then stillness, simplicity and contentment. Then truthfulness. And then finally last week we looked and explored the aspects of mindfulness and why that is such an essential tool for expressing and living out any of the other qualities that we might want to bring into our lives. So all those qualities, all loving kindness, generosity, contentment, truthfulness, mindfulness, of course it's obvious that they are really positive things. The world needs more of them, doesn't it? I'm sure, and probably we all need more of it, more of those in ourselves, in our own beings and in our lives. But of course, if you've ever tried reflecting and working on bringing any of those qualities, developing them more in your life, I think you might realize pretty quickly that although we might think it's all a good idea, actually carrying it out is another matter altogether. It's not so easy. So why, if we can agree in ourselves that loving kindness is a wonderful thing, generosity is great, etc., etc., why doesn't the rest of us follow? Why aren't we kind of automatically fully living and expressing those qualities? Well, maybe you are. I must make no assumptions. But I think for most of us, most of the time, we find that, there are other things going on. So why is it so difficult? Well, in a way, we have these entrenched habits. We have ruts. I could say ruts in our mind, but in a sense, those entrenched habits and those ruts, in a way, are us. And they've been established, developed, and deepened over, our whole life, and possibly even before. And they're encouraged from our conditioning, society, the world around us. And these ruts, these channels, can so easily take our thoughts and our emotions in a other direction, away from loving kindness, away from generosity, to a place that's much more self-centered, if you like. As I said, I make no assumptions about you, but that's certainly my experience of myself. And these channels of our energy, of our emotions, they're associated with strong emotions as well. They contain strong emotions. And if they are threatened, we can have an emotional response to them. So what creates or created these ruts and channels, these habitual ways of responding, or should I say reacting to our experience. I mean, what's at the bottom of them? And what sort of keeps them running so smoothly and keeps the channels open so much? Well, the answer to these questions, the one-word answer is, well, views. And that's what we're going to be exploring tonight. So a one-word answer to those questions is, well, views. Okay, views. So what's meant by views? Well, the traditional Pali word that's been translated here as views is drishti, and that can be translated, yes, as views, as the way we see things, the way we perceive things, our whole outlook, and how we order what it is that we experience. Another word might be vision, and I'll come back to that later. So it's referring to, if you like, the lenses or the spectacles that we put on, or that we actually are embedded in us, through which we see and interpret all our experience. Our sense organs in relationship to what we perceive as the outside world receive a constant bombardment of an almost infinite array of information, impressions, sense impressions. And our organism, if you like all organisms in life, needs some way, well, to select and create some shape into what otherwise would be just a chaos of impressions. So, as I said, all life, to some extent, needs to do this. Needs, if nothing else, to be able to discriminate and sort out what it is that the organism, i.e. us, need to survive, and what maybe threatens us. And this faculty, if you like, is traditionally known as samnya. It's part of what creates our consciousness's ability to make sense of the world and to function in it. So now this is necessary. As I said, all life needs to do this. But from the start of a basic view of the world that helps us just survive, with human consciousness for sure, which is much, much more complex, we've over time created the ability, if you like, developed the ability to create more and more complex views, more and more complex constructions of the world out there. Still perhaps with the underlying basis of what we need or want for us and what maybe threatens us. But as that construction, that ongoing shaping of the input becomes more and more complex, really our experience can tend to get further and further away from, well, the raw sense of impressions of what actually is happening. And as it becomes more and more separate and more complex, maybe it becomes less helpful, less beneficial to us. So we look to our views, we look to the ways we construct the world to make sense of it for us, and we look to that for security. That's really why, in a way, we do it. And of course, all of this goes on both consciously, we can see that, and at a much deeper level, an unconscious level, almost a sub-personal level. The views that we feel as part of our particular society, culture, upbringing, whatever, we can hold maybe unconsciously even until maybe they're challenged, and then they come up out of the depths to be seen in a bit of daylight. But our views can often, but not always, can often limit us. And in fact, that is usually what happens. And it's the limiting, fixed nature of our views that we're holding on to that maybe stops us developing more loving kindness, more generosity, etc., etc. And maybe we can just sort of explore that a little further. So let's look at it like this. The Buddha pointed out that life will present us with some inescapable facts, if you like, some inevitable experiences. And these are characteristics of life, of all conditioned life. Traditionally they're known as the marks of conditioned existence, or the three lakshanas, because it's normally regarded that there are three ways in which they can be sort of bundled together. There is actually a fourth, but it's, well, I won't go into that because time and it takes us in a slightly different direction. But you can look up the fourth lakshana for yourself sometime. One of the most striking, the major characteristic, the major thing that we run up against in life, the first mark, the first lakshana, is impermanence. All conditioned things are impermanent. And there is no exception to that, said the Buddha. No exception anywhere, at any time, in the universe, internally, exterior. In the exterior world, all is impermanent. Our attempts to hold on to things, to hold on to others, to hold on to the sense even of ourselves, are always going to be thwarted in the end. In the great flow and change of life and impermanence. Okay, so that's the first thing to be taken on board with regard to life. And because we come up against the reality of impermanence in so many ways, we would experience life often as unsatisfactory, even painful, even as a tragedy. And that leads us on to the second of the marks of existence, and that is, well, dukkha. So I've used the original Pali term here. This says that there will to some degree be suffering inherent in human life, in all life, which, as I said before, doesn't mean to say that all life is suffering, but it is an inescapable fact of life. Dukkha means, du means sort of unsatisfactory, bad, uncomfortable, painful, and ka, part of the word, it refers to a wheel. So it's said that dukkha is referring to the experience one has if your sort of wagon wheel is ill-fitting, is not well made, You have a bumpy ride. You have an unsatisfactory ride. Okay, so maybe your tire's a bit flat on your car. So, yeah, it's uncomfortable. And then the Buddha pointed out a third characteristic of existence, and that is of insubstantiality. He's saying that there is no fixed, unchanging essence to anything in existence. And particularly there is no unchanging, fixed element or aspect to ourselves. To me, even. There's an essential ungraspability about reality. And of course, we want security, we want safety, we want to feel solid ground under our feet. Well, hence unsatisfactoriness and even suffering results. And the Buddha went on to point out that our usual view on all these aspects of reality, our usual way of experiencing them and responding to them, are upside down. Those views that we have that correspond to the three lakshanas were known traditionally as the viparyasas, and that could be translated as the topsy-turvy views. Okay, so we've got everything, well, I was going to use a rude word, but I won't. Upside down, okay? So corresponding to the three lakshanas, the first viparyasa, the first topsy-turvy view is that we think they should be permanent, and we seek it where it can never be found. As a result, the inevitable suffering of different levels occurs, and we can often feel hurt and betrayed by others, by the world, by society, even by ourselves, when the permanence that we seek and we feel should be there doesn't show up. The second viparyasa is that, well, in correspondence to the truth of dukkha, is that we continually seek satisfaction in those things that can never give it. So our take on things misleads us, because often we have things upside down. We have a topsy-turvy experience of reality. Now, I hope that doesn't sound too depressing, because it isn't. It is only part of the story. It is the first of the noble truths, that there is the reality of suffering that will be present inevitably at some point. The second noble truth says, well, there is a cause for that. It starts to analyse why that is so. And then the second part of the story is the final two noble truths, that there is a way away from suffering, and that way is the practice, the living out of the Noble Eightfold Path. So it suggested that the practice of the Noble Eightfold Path, we would bit by bit turn those topsy-turvy views upside down. And what would happen if we did turn them upside down? Well, it said we would enter the realm of the vimokshas. 3 vimokshas, the 3 great freedoms, if I can say that properly, the 3 great liberations. And each one of these corresponds to both one of the topsy-turvy views and to one of the marks of existence. Firstly, the first Vimoksha, the first realm of liberation, of freedom, is that if we are able to swim, if you like, more freely in the great stream of impermanence and let things, other people, our ideas and views come and go more, hold on to things a bit less tightly, live life with a bit less fear and anxiety, then we can see and allow things to change. If we can do that, we can allow things to grow and develop, ourselves and others. We let go of fixed ideas. So it's said that this Vimoksha is called the freedom of signlessness. Okay, there's no signpost pinning down or labels pinning things down. The second great liberation, the second great freedom, we can enter by going beyond likes and dislikes, maybe seeing more discriminatorily what we really need rather than what we want in the moment, and not heaping angst on ourselves for not getting what exactly it is that we want. This is the way to greater contentment. And this realm of freedom is said to be the unbiased realm. Okay, so the third realm of liberation, of freedom, we can enter by embracing the truth of insubstantiality. Now this perhaps is a little bit harder to grasp, but we can let go of grasping if we can. If bit by bit we can climb out of the ruts and channels of habit that are being created. If we can go beyond, something that we do is we so often generalize from the particular, whatever state of mind or whatever's happening in this present moment, we tend to think is always going to be present. But if we can let go, and if we can live, less based on habit, but more creatively, as Sangharakshita said, if we can move away from a reactive response to life to a more creative response to life, i.e. allowing our responses to be new and fresh and appropriate to each moment, then we enter the great Vimoksha of Shunyata. Shunyata, there's lots I could say and actually lots I couldn't say about Shunyata, but we can think of it as, really it's the essential nature of reality that is free and endlessly creative, an unfolding beauty that we can't grasp and fix and get hold of and own, but we can be part of it. So going back to our three categories, if you like, of views that I mentioned at the beginning: wrong views, right views, and perfect views. So we've seen how it might be possible for us to turn our wrong, misleading, mistaken, upside down views around. And we can free them. We can free ourselves from them, maybe by questioning them when we're aware of them arising. This is where we need mindfulness to identify when a view is, in operation. And we might well find the cues for that are in some emotional response when our views, our long-held, deeply held and often cherished views are challenged. So we can question them. I was thinking about this in respect to myself in giving this talk. Okay, so I noticed that thinking about it to start with, I think, oh yeah, I can do that. That'll be easy. So that's a view I have that I've held as long as I can remember, or have noticed it. That, well, I can do anything. Okay. Okay. But as soon as I start doing it, as soon as I start thinking about the talk and recording it for you, then, well, it isn't always so easy. It's very enjoyable on the whole, but it isn't easy. And then when things get hard, this other view arises. It's a voice, isn't it? We have these views often arise as little voices, and it says, oh, this is hard. Oh, I can't do this. So there's another view in total contradiction to the one I had before. And of course, I have to, and hopefully I did, see those little voices, those views about myself. Maybe before I meditated, in my past, years, I might not have even sort of noticed what they were. I'd have just been, taken up by one view after another, one voice after another, and believed it. Well, now I sort of hold them a bit more lightly. I can see them, but I don't have to believe them. Okay, and I can work my way through to giving this talk and talking to you all out there. So, I've, to some extent, are able at least to free myself from the grip of a couple of little views there. And that's the sort of thing we can do. In working at that level, we can maybe get down to some more fundamental views that, fix us in a more existential way as being who I am. This is who I am. This is what the world is like. This is how I relate to the world, and this is how the world behaves towards me. And we can go beyond those views of self and other separation. And that leads to, well, the great vimokshas. So all those sort of voices, I'm not good at this, is that true? That's the questioning, that's what we can do. All those people over there, they're dangerous. Well, is that actually true? We think these views hold at all times and at all places. Well, they might be useful at some times, but we can ask ourselves, is that always true? Is that true now? So doing this, and then using the Dharma, the Buddha's teachings and guidance to reflect, to maybe reflect on those lakshanas, those truths that are offered. All things are impermanent. How can we relate this to our experience, and how can it help us understand our experience in a more truthful way? And the same for the other lakshanas. What's the nature of my suffering, my dissatisfaction? Where does it come from? What's the cause? What's the answer? What's the way beyond the suffering? So we can ask these questions and maybe find bit by bit better answers. And bit by bit, we will find ourselves with more and more right view. So in Buddhist terms, it means the right view is views that are more in accordance with reality, views that don't fix us and don't fix others and don't fix the world, that allow for growth, that allow for development, that allow for the possibility of us being free of our suffering. Sorry, a little blip there. So our right views, it's not right in terms of, being either right or wrong. It's right as in the sense of being more in accordance with the way things are. So our misled and mistaken views of reality might be upside down. That's better. Or maybe distorted. Or maybe just even a bit weak. But we can still move towards right view, which will be in accordance with the true nature of reality, which allows for impermanence, which allows for the reality of suffering, but recognises the causes and the way to transcend suffering, and allows for the ungraspability of everything. And right view encourages us to live, allows us even to live with greater loving kindness, with more generosity, in a state of more contentment, more in touch with the truth and more mindfully. And it frees us up to grow and develop. It helps us see how to live more with the flow, with the grain of reality instead of against it. But that leaves, perfect view or perfect vision. Well, traditionally, it's said that perfect view is in fact no view. Okay, one of those paradoxical conundrums that Buddhism often presents us with. So what does it mean by this? Well, actually, very hard to talk about it, but it suggests that an enlightened consciousness, a Buddha if you like, won't be restricted by habits, won't be restricted by conditioned responses to things, would see everything afresh, anew, and would have a creative and appropriate response to every circumstance. There'd be no ruts, none of those channels for habit to run along. A few weeks ago, I was talking about stillness, simplicity and contentment, and if you possibly heard that, I talked about a description of the enlightened consciousness of being like a perfect sphere on a perfect plane. And what this is illustrating, if you like, very metaphorically, is that there isn't any inbuilt bias to a Buddha or to anyone who has developed an enlightened consciousness. There's none of those ruts and channels, which means that that perfect sphere is free to move in any way in response to whatever is required on that perfect plane. So maybe that gives some hint of perfect view being said to be no view. It would mean being completely at one with reality, almost, it said, being reality itself. That's quite may be difficult to intellectually sort of get a full handle on. So I'm going to leave you with a reading from the Dhammapada, which again maybe expresses it better than I could myself, or at least gives us a hint of what that might mean. So thank you for joining me in this session, and keep watching. There will also be a meditation session this week as well. So stay well, stay healthy. Farewell. Verses from the Dhammapada. He is indeed called a Dharma practitioner for whom nowhere in the mind and body is there anything of which to say, "This is mine," and who does not grieve for what does not really exist. The Dharma practitioner who dwells in loving kindness and who is happy in the teaching of the Buddha would attain to the state that is total peace, nirvana, to the quietening of conditioned existence and to bliss. Dharma practitioner, empty this boat. Emptied, it will go quickly and more lightly for you. Having cut out craving and hatred, you will then go on swiftly to nirvana.